So, Abhinav, thanks very much for joining me today. It's my pleasure to have you. And so, tell me, has it been some years of feeling very lonely at the top?
Well, yes, I mean, I'd like more success to happen, and I'd like to see more of our athletes win gold medals, which I am quite hopeful will happen at Tokyo. But it's been 5 years, almost now, yeah, 5 years since I transitioned out of sport. The Rio Games were my last Olympic Games, and I've let go of the past, and sport taught me a lot. Of course, I had a little bit of success in it. I had tons of failure as well alongside it, but I look back at it differently now. I look back at sport more dispassionately now because I have exited my investment of sorts, and I can look back at it clearly. And I look back at it not at the few medals that I won, which hang on a wall, but I look back at it at the relationships that I was able to build. Relationships with my mom, relationships with my dad. I went with my mom as a 12-year-old boy to Germany, and the bond that I was able to build with her, staying in a little lonely sports hostel, the relationships that I was able to build with coaches, some who I got along with, some who I didn't get along with, the relationships that I was able to build with my competitors, for example, and of course the memories that I had. And that's what I remember. That's what I look back at with a great amount of fondness. The values that sport instilled in me, I think that's what will remain with me for the rest of my life. Of course, the outcomes were great, but I've let go of them. I've let go of the past, and I don't really look at my sporting success or my sporting career with too much seriousness.
So, what was the transition like? You've dedicated all those years to a particular thing, and you're done and out, and then in a sense, you're starting again, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think transition out of sport is always a difficult one for athletes. We almost live two lives. We have a life which is one as an active athlete, and then one fine day, this career ends, and it generally ends pretty abruptly, and then you have to start life all over again. But for me personally, I think I did this one well. I didn't do too much right in my sports career, but I'm pretty proud of the way I tried to transition out of it, primarily because I planned for it. My decision wasn't an abrupt one. I planned for it for 3-4 years, and I knew 3-4 years in advance that Rio was going to be my last Olympic Games, and I stood true to that. I've never been back to a shooting range ever since my last.
Oh, you haven't. I was going to ask you that.
Last Olympic shot at Rio. I've never been back. I've been back once, maybe to watch the Youth Olympic Games, but never even been back to a range. And it's been fine. It's been absolutely fine. I know, and I'm at peace with the fact that nothing in life will probably be as thrilling as winning a gold medal at the Olympic Games, and I'm absolutely all right with that fact. I'm happy chasing other goals. I'm happy chasing maybe not such lofty goals, but I'm happy chasing the goals of life, and life is challenging, and
absolutely, even more so
happy.
now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. No, wonderful. But I can't let you go without just asking you one question. With Tokyo, and do you think that exclusive club of yours is going to be breached? And I'm asking you this question not from the heart, but the head. Because of course we're all going to hope for the medals, and we're all going to hope that there's going to be another top podium finish. But really, what do you think?
I'm going to reply from my heart, because I don't follow sport. I'm not in the sports world so closely. I watch sport from the prism of a sports fan, and as an athlete, I was not the most positive athlete around, but as a sports fan, I've really changed. I've become extremely positive, and I look at our Olympic team, our Indian Olympic team, and going into Tokyo with a lot of hope, with a lot of optimism, because never before in the history of our country are we seeing athletes going to an Olympic Games with an absolute realistic chance of winning gold medals. Just for example, our shooting contingent has 15 members in the team,
yes.
eight of which are world number ones and world number twos. So even if 50% of them perform to their potential, we have 4 gold medals right there. So and it's not just in shooting; it's in many other sports where we have athletes of the absolute world-class athletes who won championships at the elite level, going into these games. And I think these athletes also represent a kind of a new India. I think the new generation is one which is far more self-confident, has far more self-belief than at least my generation. You know, I was defensive in nature, and particularly me, I was a chicken-hearted person. But I see a different generation now. I see the girls and boys of today, of course, and also in society, not just in sport. I think in society we are seeing that evolution of Indian society, and I think exposure. I think far more exposure than ever before. So many things have contributed to that fact, and I, as a fan, very hopeful that we will have our best ever Olympic performance.
So the mixed bag at the ISSF World Cup, something to worry about, or it's just we just go with all hope and just think it's a blip on the way.
It's not even a blip. I think it's the way it should be. I mean, you don't want to perform at your peak 2 weeks prior to an Olympic Games. You want to perform to the best of your ability at the Olympic Games. You rather experiment at a championship 2-3 weeks prior to games, fine-tune whatever you need to fine-tune, use it as an opportunity to fine-tune. And I think that's exactly what these athletes have done, and I think try to do. That's what I try and analyze from the outside. But I think absolutely fine. I don't see it as a blip at all. I think it is perhaps the right tactical way of going about things.
So, someone just wrote saying, stop being so self-deprecating. And just because of that, Abhinav, I'm going to go back to a question you probably have answered so many times, but I honestly want to know, what was it like, right at that point where you thought, that there's history in the making, the kind of pressure, the only reason I also ask this is because, when we're talking about mind over matters, it also resonates in the future. And it's not just something we leave in the past. So that glory that came amidst intense focus, intense pressure. What goes on in the minds of sports people like you at that precise point?
Well, that precise point, I think your job is to stay in the moment and detach yourself from outcomes. I think firstly, if you are thinking that history beckons and it all depends on one shot, and that's what happened to me in Beijing. The gold medal depended on the last shot of that Olympic final. We were tied going after 69 competition shots. I was tied with Henry Häkkinen of Finland, and it depended on one shot if I would win a gold medal. And the last thing that you want to be thinking of is what the future holds for you. You have to remain focused on at that given moment on just executing your skill. And there is intense pressure at that moment. You're desperately trying to hold on to and collect all what you have, and it requires courage. It requires creativity to find the ability to stand still and to find calm amongst chaos, because that is a chaotic time. I mean, there is no such thing as athletes are some superhuman beings and super confident people. At least I was a chicken. My sport was a lonely sport, but one thing accompanied me throughout my career, which was self-doubt. Of course, there was self-doubt, which one had to coexist with, but find a way to overcome and find a way to work with.
But isn't that quite normal? Because you're always trying to achieve a little bit more, and the kind of intense pressure on athletes. I know I was reading this interview of yours where you said that normally if you're under intense pressure, it's probably because you're as a normal person, you're under pressure, say once in a month or once in a few months. I mean, an athlete or of any sport is constantly under pressure to perform. So that self-doubt, every little tournament that, an ATP tour or, a badminton player, a shooter, anybody, if you're going for back-to-back tournaments, you do well in one and you go down in the other, won't that self-doubt be natural?
Yeah, but that's part and parcel of sport. And I think it depends from person to person, individual to individual. But I think you're making a larger point on the pressures that athletes have to face. And I think, yes, I fully agree. Athletes perhaps have very unique lives. I mean, we have unique lives because we constantly have to face success. We have to constantly face failure. Both of them have challenges. Dealing with success is hard as well. It's not just dealing with failure. Athletes have the pressure, the physiological pressure in training. I mean, which is intense. which also has an effect on your mindset and on your mental health, for example, because you're pushing your body to such extreme limits. And if you do not recover enough physically, it's going to affect you mentally as well. You're constantly traveling, you're in different time zones. You have to cope up with sleep, different lack of sleep at times, an impending end of a career. And I mean, lots of challenges in an athlete's journey. A lot of red flags where we are vulnerable. An athlete is, perceived to be superhuman almost, and there is a larger misconception in society that athletes have that armor and are mentally strong. But in reality, perhaps very vulnerable. We're a very vulnerable population just because of the fact we live we live in an uncertain world. It's very our sports world is very uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen next, which is challenging. But we learn to deal with it. Some deal with it better than others, but it is challenging on the mind.
No, I agree, and I'm glad you brought up mental health, because that's one thing I wanted to also speak with you. But before I go there, I know someone's written, can you have sign language? But unfortunately, I don't know sign language, and I'll have to figure that one out. So, Naomi Osaka, in a sense, just brought that topic right back into the headlines with, mental health and athletes. And I think there was a IOC meeting a couple of years ago, which said that 33.6% of elite athletes, they reported symptoms of depression and anxiety. And now with the pandemic, Abhinav, that it's become a big worry all around the population. And of course, the athletes, their training has been disrupted. There's been so much uncertainty going into the games. How will our sport ecosystem evolve or adapt? Or what does it need to do going forward?
On the particular aspect of mental health?
Yes.
So I think, the pandemic has been challenging for society. It's been challenging for everybody mentally. And I think the only silver lining of these times has been the destigmatization of mental health to a great degree, because the naysayers and the skeptics of mental health suddenly had mental health issues themselves. People are talking much more openly about mental health in general. And we are also seeing that in the sports world, which is great to see, because more athletes are talking about it, but also organizations are talking about it and trying to take some action. There are two aspects to mental health in sport, and perhaps even in organizations. One is of course a reactive thing in creating resources when an athlete or an individual does suffer from mental health problems. But I think the great amount of emphasis also needs to be put in prevention of mental health issues. And that can only happen when you create environments which are psychologically safe environments, for example, for athletes to compete in. There is tremendous pressure on athletes, and it is the whole environment which has to be an enabling one. They have to perform in an environment which is secure psychologically, where it is all right and absolutely all right to fail. But to have the courage and for everybody around the athlete to pick the athlete up or pick the individual up when he or she does fail, and to continue to see hope in them when they feel hopeless. And to create these environments is critically important for athletes, because we are continuously pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. That's what sport is all about, pushing yourself to the limit, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And when you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're also giving yourself much more chances of failing and falling down. And just if we create these environments which are enabling in nature, which are psychologically safe, I think that's where the work needs to be done. It's also about advocacy. It's also about education, not just to athletes, but also coaches, the environment, the leadership, the expectation that surrounds the athlete. Also, how you talk to an athlete, how you converse with an athlete. Now, now we are a week away from Tokyo, and I'm sure a lot of athletes have to endure uncomfortable conversation, which is go for gold and win us a gold medal, you're our only hope, and this and that. This is not the type of conversation you have to be having with an athlete, right? So it is about education. It's also about making sure that the environment is safe and secure and enabling.
So there's something that I don't know if many people know about the fact that you mentored two refugee athletes who are now headed to Tokyo. Tell us a little bit about that and how fulfilling was that?
So, that I retired in 2016, as I mentioned, and one of my greatest competitors and rival, Niccolò Campriani from Italy, who won 3 gold medals at the Olympics, also retired uh, at that same Olympic final. He went on to win gold that day. I ended up fourth, but we were rivals. But we really became friends after our sporting careers ended, and both of us were highly inspired by the first ever refugee team who took part at the Olympic Games in Rio. These are human beings who've gone through immense hardship in life and found refuge in sport. And Nico wanted to do something for this cause, and he decided that he would set up a program in Lausanne because he works with the IOC in Lausanne. And we started out with a selection of 25 refugees and picked 3 of them and tried to train them in our chosen sport of shooting, because that's where our competency lies, and try and make these refugees athletes, and then try and make them qualify them for Tokyo. And of course, it's been an incredible journey where we've really seen the true power of sport. The true power of sport is not about winning these medals at these Olympic Games. The true power of sport lies in changing people's lives in a positive manner. And there it's been so heartening and fulfilling to see how sport has impacted these 3 human beings who, were low, who were depressed, who've been through so much hardship, and suddenly from one day to the other, suddenly had this glitter in their eyes, suddenly had a goal, suddenly had a huge smile on their face every time they entered the shooting range, for example. And now 2 of them have made it to Tokyo, and of course this project is already, it's a great success for the project already. We're not looking at them becoming champions in Tokyo, because probably they won't. The time hasn't been enough for them to come to the level that is required to win. But for sure, we're happy that they've become champions in life, and I think that is perhaps much more important.
So are these kind of initiatives that you are going to be involved with going forward, or is it like you can take Abhinav out of the sport, but you can't take the sport out of Abhinav eventually?
No, I think I'm involved in a few other areas. Of course, I am trying to create a new identity for myself as well. My career in sport is over, and I don't want to hold on to that anymore. I want to move on. I have to move forward. I almost have to forget the past, and that's what I try and do. Of course, I'm trying to set a business of my own and trying to have a little bit of success in these very challenging times in it. But my primary outreach to sport in India is through my foundation, the Abhinav Bindra Foundation. And we have 3 elements to the foundation, if I can speak about it for a minute.
Yes, sure.
The first element, the first pillar of my foundation is intervention, where we've set out these high-performance centers which bring in science and technology to athletes training. We give out a scholarship program called STEAM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Analytics, and Medicine, and incorporate all these elements into grassroots level training. So we have about 60 athletes in our program from the ages of 11 to 15, because I really want to work in the grassroots and give them access to absolute global best practice in all these elements. So we've set out these centers which are cutting edge in nature, bring in the world's best, bring in the world's best knowledge, which brings in the world's best technology. Some of them probably not even available in the United States, but available in parts of India. So that's the intervention pillar. The second pillar is education. And, I believe that to progress in sport in India, it's not just about athletes, but also the whole ecosystem that surrounds the athletes. So we set out a sports science and medicine institute, where we started out with bachelor's and master's degrees in sports science and physiotherapy to start with, and we're going to increase those courses as we get along. So we're giving scholarships there as well. The second area in education is governance, because if you follow Indian sport, governance is something which is often being talked about, perhaps for the wrong reasons, but we have to do something about it. We have to work towards empowering our administrators. We have to do something about empowering our leadership. and the people who run sport. So we, alongside the ELMF Foundation, my foundation got in partnership with the University of Loughborough, which is the world's best sports university based out of the United Kingdom. And we started a course in leadership in sport on creating leaders to how to run sport, how to run high performance sport. So we had 60 people in our first course, which included people from, say, the Sports Authority of India, the National Federation, state associations, state governments, etc. Our second course is almost about to end, so that will carry on. The third element of education is athlete mental health, something I'm passionate about myself. So doing a lot of work there in advocacy, in training people, training the ecosystem on specifically on athlete mental health. And the third program is using sport for societal good. And there the program, the refugee program, which is called Make a Mark, that's what we started. The legacy of Make a Mark is going to continue because we are an Olympic champion in archery, is taking this initiative forward, going into Paris. And of course, we will continue to support that project as well. But I'm also looking at how sport can play a more meaningful role in society in India. And I think it really can, because we have a very young society in India. Many young people in India, majority of our population below the age of 30. And I think the values of sport, they need to imbibe the values of sport. Sport teaches you how to win, but more importantly, sport teaches you how to lose. We have to become a more inclusive and more sporting society. And there is no better way than sport to instill these values of honesty, of integrity, of having a goal, of having the ability to listen, to different perspectives, and with values of Olympism, of friendship and respect, something which is rarely seen in today's times. So I think I'm trying to set up with a program in leadership, which can hopefully go around also for young kids to, all of them may not play sport. All of them may not imbibe the values through actually playing sport, but all of them can certainly imbibe the values that sport can bring to them through different cases.
So I'm just picking up one word from what you just said, leadership. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about all the politicians who are holding all the sports bodies in the country. How are we ever going to change and move into becoming a global sports power till people who have absolutely no knowledge of a sport are leading those sports?
Well, I think there is an element of leadership. You could be an office bearer, you could be a president, and you could be whatever secretary general of a particular association. But I think the key here lies in bringing in quality personnel into organizations who look after the day-to-day running of sport. Sport is all about doing the day-to-day well. It is all about doing the boring and the mundane well with efficiency, and bringing in this environment of excellence into the day-to-day running of sport. And I think there I'm heartened by the fact that a lot of our sporting bodies are suddenly starting to attract a lot of young energy, young people who are wanting to involve themselves in sport as job seekers, as a source of employment. And we have to empower these people because they do majority of the work. The leadership has to guide in a strategic way. And even certainly a politician, they can stay, but as long as they do not interfere in the day-to-day and leave the day-to-day to professionals, I think is the way to go, because I don't know if we will see a time where we will not have these people, but I'm hopeful of the fact that even a politician, if he or she has his heart in the right place, can do a lot of good for sport, can leverage his or her position to bring things for the development of their sport. So as long as they leave the day-to-day running to professionals, as long as they leave the technical aspects of running the sport to experts, I think that is the way to go. And I think what we need to do is really to empower these professionals, and we need more professionalism coming into the running of sport.
So someone's asking if your foundation is hiring. If you're hiring, they want to join your foundation. There are many questions.
It's a very small foundation, but feel free to write in. Feel free to contribute.
And there's another question that has come multiple times, so I will ask. You often talk about detaching from the result and focusing on the process. But how did you do it exactly? Because I find it quite hard.
It came from an experience, and in my experience of detachment came from my life's greatest failure. In 2004, I went to the Athens Olympics where I broke an Olympic record, but unfortunately finished seventh in that Olympic final. I had to shoot 10 very ordinary shots to actually win a medal on that day, but I ended up shooting the 10 worst shots of my life. I was very attached to that outcome and very disappointed, very bitter. After that, a few days after my event, I got to know that the floor that I was standing on had a loose tile underneath, which reverberated every time I picked up my rifle. So that just broke my heart. But that also taught me something. That taught me this detachment, and that taught me to be more focused on the process and to be more focused on the journey, and the journey became its own reward. Because the outcome, the eventual outcome, I could not always control. I could control what I could do. I could control that I could try and be the best that I could be, but I could not control what my competitor was going to do, or if I was really going to win a gold medal on a particular day. Sport can never be scripted. So there, slowly but surely, I started to learn detachment, but it was hard. But it came through the experience of failure, of great failure.
So the last year, the pandemic, Abhinav, what has it been like? What have you had your moments of sitting and being uninspired like the rest of us? Or, you've been still positive, thinking that end of the tunnel is nearer than we think it is?
No, I think it's been challenging for everybody. I think it's been challenging for me as well. I think for me, the second wave is harder. I think it was much harder to see all the misery and the hardship around everybody. I think that was just tough. But I think what sport taught me is to remain hopeful. Sport taught me also to learn to adapt, and I think this last couple of years has forced us all to adapt to situations. Working in different ways, adapting your businesses, adapting life to a great degree, adapting your mindset to a great degree. So it is all about that adaptability, and that's what I tried to do. Most times failed, sometimes succeeded, but I've kept trying.
So what was it? What's a day in the lockdown in a sense? I mean, Punjab is you're still in Chandigarh, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So Punjab has opened up now finally, but what has it been like? When you can't go out, you can't do anything, and it's better not to do it either. So what was a day like in the life of Abhinav Bindra, the non-shooter?
Well, of course, I had to adapt and start working from home, adapt my business, adapt the running of my foundation, which was also very challenging because my foundation is also dependent on support I receive from other people who believe in my cause, and that suddenly dried up from one day to the other because a lot of focus has gone into COVID relief, and understandably so, and rightly so. But it was all about adaptability, trying to make things work. But it also gave an opportunity to spend more time with my family, to spend more time with my parents, which of course in the time of my sporting career was rare because I was traveling for maybe 250 days of the year. So I tried to do that. I spent a lot of time bonding with my dogs. My niece and nephew were here for a while, so I enjoyed spending a lot of time with them. Built an incredible bond with my niece and also with my nephew. We're best friends now, and so there were also many positives to it. So several challenges as well, but you have to try and do the best that you can. And of course, there were days where I felt hopeless, and there are days even now that I'm challenged. But what do? Life teaches you to keep looking ahead.
And I think you were probably more experienced to dig in deeper than many of us. Abhinav, there's one last question I'll take from here, and I will let you go after mine. How much credit would you give to Indian sports system for your success?
Well, the Indian sports system during my career was still evolving early on. When I started shooting under a mango tree. And with not much available in India. Of course, I rather not talk. Maybe I'll talk about the evolution of the Indian sports system. Would be rather going into negatives, and so I started under a mango tree, and I started when I had no coaching available in India. But now, when an athlete, a young shooter wants to start, a girl or a boy wants to start, has access to an Olympic level shooting range in several parts of the country, has access to knowledge, has access to infrastructure and equipment, which was never there in my time. So the Indian sports scenario has evolved. I'm not saying that we are there, but we've certainly made a lot of progress in the last decade. Success in sport perhaps takes time. Results in sport is a cycle of probably 8 to 10 years, and perhaps we're going to see the results of all the seeds that were put in 10 years ago, perhaps in a couple of weeks in Tokyo.
Okay, so I will let you go with the final question. I know you've spoken about your business and that's where you're working hard. What other challenges, what is your next phase going to look like? What are you looking at?
Well, I'm of course looking at creating a sustainable and meaningful livelihood, which is what I'm trying to do.
Welcome to the rest of us on our lives. Welcome to our club now.
Absolutely, it's about climbing the mountain of life, and it is about dealing with life, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Wonderful. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Abhinav. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad we spoke of other things and not just shooting. And I think we spoke a lot of other things, actually. And great takeaways from this. It was absolutely, like I said, a pleasure. And hopefully we will connect again in the future, and wishing you the very best in your next phase. All the best and stay safe, Abhinav. Thanks for joining me.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.